emotions and memories and all that stuff. So your hippocampus has memories. That's where you keep your memories.
Right.
Okay. And those memories, and this is where trauma comes in, where those memories, they become strong, the bad memories.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're dealing with something in the present moment, and if you haven't fully processed the trauma correctly, or you didn't have somebody to support you through that trauma exposure or after, like, you hold those memories and they become present, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Like, you live that moment. If you speak about the trauma, you're in it. You're basically living trauma constantly.
Right.
So you're in flight, flight, or freeze mode. Your anxiety's up, your depression's up. You can't move, your motivation's not there. You feel fatigue, you feel sick, you feel tired. Nobody's there. You know, it's just, it becomes like a heavy weight. And that's where I come in as a therapist, and I'm like, let's lift that. Let's get rid of that.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Cultivating You podcast with Anthony Dwayne.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, beautiful people, welcome to another episode of Cultivating You podcast. I am your host, Anthony Dwayne, and I have another very special guest for you today. Her name is Adriana Felix. She is a independently licensed therapist. She is a Native American woman who works directly with the Native American community here in Tucson, Arizona, providing services. She is an artist at heart, and I am truly honored to have her on the podcast today. So, Adriana, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anthony.
You're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. So this is going to be a great episode. We never fail to have a intriguing conversation on our commutes to and from places. So I'm really excited about today. And, you know, I've learned, working alongside you as a therapist, I've learned quite a bit. And I'm trying to increase that knowledge. So I do really appreciate everything that, you know, you're not only telling me, but as I'm just watching and observing you and learning from you. And it's really great to have you on because, as we know, it's National Mental Health Awareness Month. So I was really excited to be able to have you come on because at first I was just going to do like an episode about emotional regulation and things like that. But the fact that I got to ask you as a therapist to come on is really cool. So I'm hoping we can really dive in and talk about trauma because you are a trauma specialist. You've seen a lot of trauma throughout your career, and you're very knowledgeable about it. And I'd love to be able to give people some information just as far as, like, we all know somebody who has dealt with trauma, right? In our social group, in our families, our friends, we all know somebody who has gone through like deep emotional trauma. And sometimes we just don't really know how to respond to these people or how to treat them. Sometimes we push them away because we don't want to deal with that kind of stuff. So, and that's all really due to our own lack of education about the subject, I believe. So that would be a great thing for us to dive into today and really talk about and get your take on it. But first, before we do that, I'd really like to get to know you a little bit better and have the listeners get to know you a little bit better about where you came from, where you're going. You know, what led you down the path to therapy? You know, was this a calling that you felt in your heart? Did your parents push education on you? Did you discover through your own healing that you wanted to help others? You know what I'm saying? Like, what was your experience with that and how did you get into therapy?
Oh, good question. So many reasons. So my original career path was, I just want to do art for the rest of my life. And that's what I told my parents. And they're like, now you got to get an education and you have to be practical and you have to go to school and just get an education. So I focused on my education. So I that was my calling to get out, was to get educated, because there was a lot of things that happened in my life, and if I told you everything, it would be here for a day, at least 24 hours, going through everything that I've experienced. So a lot of obstacles in the way of achieving goals. But my focus has always been to reach that point in education where it's like, okay, what's next? And then if there's nothing next, what's beyond, and kind of look at what can I do for my community? What can I do for the world? Not just in a small sense, like I'm thinking globally, the things that I want to achieve and help people with, because there's a crisis going on in our world, which is hate and violence and crime and injustice, and just like the devil is coming from hell, like taking over our planet,
Right.
So we as a people, as a Native people, we need to get back those rights and take back our land, and really be active in our communities to curb the generational traumas, because we keep reliving it. And when we keep reliving and retelling the stories, even though it is part of our history, we don't want to be living in that victim role.
Right.
We want to be warriors and help our people, and the women and the men together can do that. Like, I feel like as we work together, like we have a power that we work with these kids, and it's like they don't have that unconditional love at times. Like they get treated very cold, and towards the parents are like angry at them all the time because they're not doing what they're told, and it's like they're not addressing the trauma that this kid has been through. There's a lack of understanding of what they need to do to help their child, and what has happened, and what they have done, and what they cease to see what they do. They stop looking at themselves as a problem. So, but as far as going back to why I became a therapist, sorry.
No.
So
Digress as much as you want.
But there's a whole story behind it. But mainly, like, I wanted to be an architect. So I became an architect student. I actually got into the School of Architecture at UNM, and I was getting B's and A's and doing great. And unfortunately, the underlying story of all that was I was also involved in just graffitis and like running with the kind of rough crowd back then. Like being a raver and just being involved in, like, people would just like jump me. Like I would just be somewhere and I'd like get jumped. It was like constantly like having black eyes and cuts and stuff, and my family doesn't even know this because I was living by myself, but I was like in a battle with people, like, ex-boyfriends and new girlfriends, and I'd be like, like I just had to stay on that road and just focus, and school was always that way out. Like I remember in Los Lunas when I was living out there, and I had to deal with alcoholism in my family, and my father being an alcoholic and not wanting to be in that life anymore, like not wanting to have myself be exposed to that life and wanting to get out. And so I did. I sought out mentors. I worked with Chip Simons, who was a photographer for the Beastie Boys, like the famous fish head pictures. Like he was the
I think I've seen a documentary on that guy.
Chip Simon. So I actually wanted to go live with him. Like I ran away and met him because like he judged one of my the art shows at school, and like I drew this like psychedelic peacock thing and like a hand coming out and then like a little man in the fire. Like it was just a tripped out picture, you know what I mean? Like, and he wanted to give me first place, and the principal, the vice principal, like I was like crazy, like smart kid, but they thought I was so weird because I actually got arrested at school for talking about how marijuana could save the world because we could make paper out of it.
Right.
And I learned that from my English teacher, went to my art teacher after and was telling people, and she like cleared the room and told me to wait there.
Yeah.
And I thought she was going to like talk to me, but I thought it was weird that all the kids had to leave the room.
Yeah.
So, and then they arrested me and took me to jail. Like I literally sat in jail It's like, what the hell?
For telling the truth.
For telling the truth. And so, like, I just felt like I had this, like, weird power of words, and like I just moved people, like literally got them out of there. But just weird things like that happened to me in my life. And like, I was a loner in a sense. Like, I just did my own thing. I lived with artists. I helped build a house. That's what made me want to be an architect student, was I helped him build his house, design it, and then helped him build it. Like me, my friend Jada, and her boyfriend and all his like friends or whatever. Yeah. So we like did that, and we lived in a trailer and ate beans, and the dog ate our cheese, and we were starving. So it was like not a good. Yeah. It was like the dog ate our cheese.
You were the epitome of a starving artist.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was living with a starving artist. Yeah. So, but no, he had a gallery, Timothy Thew Gallery in Atlanta, Georgia, and his story is even more amazing. Chemo Minton, like his story is amazing. Like he used to do underground rave shows in Europe, and that's how he was discovered. Like they would just get generators and throw art together, and like they became that. But yeah, so I being an artist and like thinking about how I wanted to incorporate that into a career, that was the trick. And so architecture wasn't it. So I dropped out of that, and then my brother, well, before that, my brother was murdered. So there was a long story. So I lived in Alaska for 4 years, and I had a boyfriend who committed suicide, and that started a catatonic depression. So that threw me into something I never experienced. It was very profound and painful. And I had to get help, because that was the first time I had no control over what was happening. Like I literally would leave things on the stove. I didn't know what day it was. I didn't know if I ate. I didn't know if I paid bills. I didn't know. I was just checked out.
Right.
Like, and there was one kid just like came in and like rescued me. I didn't even know him really. He had been in my house with his friend that I let stay there. And Willow was her name, and she had been raped before. And you're gonna advisory on this thing, because there's a lot.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I don't know where she's at anymore, but yeah, so I let her stay at my house when I was in Alaska, so she could have a safe place. So I was creating safe places for people before I knew I needed a safe place. So she just lived there. I never charged her anything. I actually sent her money from Alaska, and took care of her. And then when I got back, she had already figured out her life or whatever, and she had a little friend with her, and he was like 17. I think I was 23, and he came and said, "You need help." So it's like they called my mom, and then he helped my dad move all my stuff out, and we took my Chevelle Super Sport and all my belongings and went back to New Mexico, and that's when I went through my therapy, which I stayed for 3 weeks just in bed, like waking up 3 a.m. It was like witching hour. I just remember I kept saying that, this is the witching hour, like the evil's coming, or sadness. So it was like between 11 or 7 or 8 or 9, about 9 o'clock to about 11 o'clock is the time when most depression happens at night for people, because it's the most loneliest time. It's the transition time. It's when families come together. And so when you don't have that, it's very lonely.
Right.
And so those were the times I would always pay attention to times. But then I started medication, which was Zoloft, I think it was, and I saw a psychiatrist. And it helped me, but it numbed me. And then I had to get out of that. So skateboarding was my savior. So I became involved in the skateboard community. Ryan Simonetti was one of the first guys that gave me a skateboard, which was, he's friends with Steve-O. We're friends with, all these I've been skateboarding since I was little. Yeah. But like I got back into it as a therapy process for myself.
Right.
So, and I worked at the skate shop. I worked at, I think I remember, what the hell was the name of the skate shop? I can't think right now. But anyway, it was Ryan Semede's skate shop in Albuquerque. And yeah, I started competing. I started like really practicing with like a lot of pro skaters, like real pro skaters, like
Right.
J.R. Neves from what was that, Anti-Hero, like, you know, just different people. Rocky Norton, he was in Thrasher a long time ago, like
Oh, okay,
just
yeah.
a lot of people that and Rocky was funny. He's an artist now. Like, he'll probably see this podcast, be like, "Oh, she gave me some props," or like, "Shut up," you know. Well, I don't know what he'll say. I don't care. But anyway, like, it was helpful for me because I didn't see them as like, "Oh, I'm gonna go and get these guys. Like, I want to do these guys or whatever." Like, I just wanted to go do my shit. Like, I wanted to get my feelings out and
Yeah.
aggression. And like, some people would label me like something, and I would be like, you know what? And I'd come in with black and blue knees and cuts everywhere, and just
Yeah.
be like, I'm getting my shit out. Like, this is my
Yeah.
therapy. So after that, I was a waitress for a long time. So, and it just became like a thing where people tell me stuff. And but when it really hit me was when I worked with the Alzheimer's patients. And then when I started doing therapy with them, like, my boss put me one-on-one with a real critical client who was, I mean, he went from working in Wells to having full-on blown-out Alzheimer's in 3 weeks. And
Oh,
then
wow.
I had to help him because he was very aggressive. He was a very strong person physically, and he needed direction. So I would stay with him every day, and I would work with him, and we painted murals and just beautiful. It was a beautiful thing, and it really, that was what inspired me to go back and switch from architecture to psychology.
Okay.
So
That's awesome. That's a pretty harrowing story in the short amount of time that you put that in, and I'm sure I'm sure there's a lot to unpack there. And you know, I'm sorry for, you know, the loss of your brother and all those, you know, horrible things. That's got to be tough to go through. And yeah, trauma itself it affects us all, right? Like, even if it's not something like immensely painful or something that we go through, like just in our day-to-day lives, and as children, we go through, I think, a lot of trauma that we don't even realize, especially in our culture, American culture, I guess, if you will. Because, like, so I think I talked to you about Gabor Mate and his book, The Myth of Normal. And he really emphasizes that, you know, that trauma is like a Greek word for wound. And it's not the things that happen to us, it's what happens inside of us in our brains, and it's like really imprinted on us. And those things, actually, the myth of normal is like what I was referring to earlier, is that in our society, we do things to our kids and each other that we think are normal, but they're not. And we don't consider it trauma because it's like, this is how we are. So for instance, like even little children, there's a lot of talk these days are like, oh, we're too soft on our kids, and we're too this and we're too that, you know what I'm saying? And it's kind of like reminds me of the Meet the Fockers movie, where he's like, quit Fockerizing them, you know what I'm saying? Like, quit picking them up when they're crying, and like let them work out their problems. But the thing is, like, most people understand is like there's a hierarchy of needs. Like, little children need these things. They need to be consoled. They need to have that love, like you said, like,
Right.
and if they don't have that, that's going to imprint on them, and that's going to be the reason why we get pissed off when somebody's late to pick us up, or you know what I'm saying? Because it's like this abandonment thing, like we're not good enough, but we don't even remember that memory as a child or anything like that. So I think it's really interesting, and I just love to get your take on that and what we could do different for our youth and just people in general, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all about your approach. You talk to your children or to anybody that you care about with love.
Right.
You have to have that respect for your children as well as your partner, your colleagues, or whatever. Like, there's got to be that respect for them so that you can communicate with them. Otherwise, they feel that, you know, if they don't feel respected or heard, they're going to feel rejected and hurt.
Right.
You know, or sad or mad or frustrated or just uncomfortable, you know, like you have to set that mood. If you're not in the mood to communicate that.
Right.
You know, I don't want to talk to you right now. I'm busy, you know, rather than like get away or ignore them completely.
Yeah,
you know?
like be like passive or passive aggressive or whatever.
Yeah, and one of the keys is like when a kid is wanting your attention, just turn and say yes, you know, and they're like, okay, give me a minute, I'll be right with you. You know what I mean? Give them something to do. Give them something to wait for. Give them a time limit, especially with autistic children.
Right.
They need that assurance like all the time.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's one thing I've learned too. Yeah, it's like you gotta they have to be on a schedule. Like they have to know what's going on, and if you alter that, it's throwing them off track like completely. So they got to know what's going on. They got to be acknowledged and everything like that. And one other thing I picked up through your story is that you found a lot of ways to to basically do that you considered your therapy, right? And that's a fascinating thing that I think I've been learning lately, is that you would never think of, I mean, I have thought of art as therapy but I would never think of, like, I guess skateboarding as therapy, or, you know, even just sports as therapy. I never thought of it in that capacity. And I think that's pretty amazing, because you can almost now, from the way I think about it, you can almost turn any activity into therapy. And like, even for me, shooting this podcast has been like an experience, like a spiritual experience for me, because it's like I can be creative, and I also get human connection. You know what I'm saying? So it makes it a very great experience for me, and I consider it a bit of therapy as well. And one thing that you didn't really touch on that I know you're very excited about is your fresco art. And I'd really love to get more into that and what your plans are for the future with that, because it sounds amazing. It sounds like it can really change people's lives. And you trained, or you're under the tutelage of a master at the craft, Federico, what was his name? Vigil. Yeah, so you trained under this guy who has like a very deep art lineage, you know what I'm saying?
God.
And
I mean, it was just amazing.
Yeah. How was it?
Okay, so I'll tell this story again, because I tell this story sometimes, not all the time, but so probably, I don't know when it started, but I used to have these dreams, reoccurring dreams of white walls and like drawings and like just people on scaffolding, like with black hair, dark skin, like my people, like, you know, just that. It was like a beautiful thing. Like I would just go to sleep and I would just be like, oh, you know what I mean? And I continued to search for that. Like even when I was going to Alaska, like I traveled, I lived in Eureka, I lived in Arcadia and Humboldt County, California, which is like beautiful, lush, green,
right?
Like mushrooms, fields everywhere. Like it's just like it's just like you just want to take a bite of it. It's like the juiciest apple you ever tasted.
Right. Like
that's California. That's Humboldt County. It's like a juicy apple. Like I don't know how to explain it. Like the love that I felt there, the experiences I had there was just so amazing. Like anyway, where did I go? Oh yeah, so the dreams were before that. So that was I started having those dreams of walls probably in the 90s. Like I had lots of visions in the 90s. I had a lot of experiments going on in the 90s. Yeah, so,
I can relate.
Yeah. But anyway, so where was I going with that again?
Your fresco painting.
Yes, getting back to the frescoes.
Yeah.
So I remember I wanted to see Bill Gates' house. So we were in Washington, D.C. I don't even know, Washington State, sorry. I don't even know if he lived there. But I was just like, my brain was like, Bill Gates, millionaires. Like, I just looking at millionaires' houses and like the facades and the beautiful architecture and everything. And it just hit me. It's just like, I need to do something with these. Like, So the dreams were coming because I was dreaming about buildings and walls and everything. In Alaska, I would always look for things there. Like I didn't know what I was searching for. And then I got back to the University of New Mexico. I started school again. I was on my path, and I was getting ready to graduate, and I was in a class, and I was going on a field trip with the teacher, and we walked in to the National Hispanic Cultural Center. And as we were walking, there's this long, like, it's like going to the temple or something, you know, like there's a pyramid at the end of it, you know, so you walk, and then there's the Torreon, which is like a lookout tower. So during wars, back in the older days, they had Torreons, the towers, lookout towers, so they could look for enemies coming. And so they built the Torreon, and they didn't know what to put in it, and so they had all these people, artists, come up with ideas. And Federico, who was an artist from Santa Fe, he painted frescoes. He worked with the protégés of Diego Rivera. So he worked with Lucy Block and the Demetrots. I know I probably said it wrong, but anyway.
Yeah. What is that?
That there's two people.
Oh, those are
people. There's a husband and wife.
Oh, okay, I got you.
And they were older. Like there's a picture of Federico with them, and they're so cute. Like they're just like little old people. But the husband was the plaster, and the wife did the pigments.
Okay.
And so they worked under Diego Rivera.
Okay.
So when he was doing the frescoes in San Francisco, he did the Rockefeller Center, which they tore that one down because he put Stalin or somebody. It was like a communist thing.
Right.
So it's very political art, and you don't just put frescoes anywhere. It's a noble art.
Right.
It's a lost art.
Yeah, because they use like it's actual like earth pigmentations, right? It's like you get the colors from plants and flowers. No, is that wrong?
That's organic. So it has to be inorganic. If you put a flower on lime, it's gonna eat the shit out of that color. Because you're working with caustic lime, so it's a chemistry experiment. So you're making a crystallization. So so there's lime and water. So you mix that together, and you age the lime. The lime and the water have to be in a clean area, so it's very sterile, and the water has to be distilled, and you mix that together.
Okay.
And you age it. I have lime that's been aging since 2004.
Wow. Yeah, so it's a process then. And so that's kind of a amazing part about how this could be such an effective therapy for people, because like even with like equine therapy, horse therapy, it's like you have to like learn the animal, you got to be patient with it, and you have to, you know, read its, you know, patterns and its emotions and stuff, and it kind of connects with you. And obviously this isn't an animal, but there's a long process, and you have to be patient with yourself almost, right? Like you have to
discipline.
And you have to go, and you got to make yourself go all the way through the project and to the completion of it. And I think that's a big part of it too, right?
And that's why graffiti comes into play with this, because in my mind, you have 16 hours to paint this fresco, this section. When you're doing graffiti, you're illegal.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't even.
There's a time frame.
Yeah, you're like, I gotta hurry up before I get caught. You know what I'm saying? So like in my mind, like that's what the speed was all about. Like learning how to paint fast, and that was another part of myself that we don't know, because there's lots of layers in my life that made me. But yeah, so I always visioned like as a graffiti artist, I could do this quickly. So. But you have to know you're painting. That's the thing about fresco. It's like you have to memorize what you're creating. Like you have to paint it, draw it. You could even do studies of it before you actually paint the fresco, because once it's painted, it's permanent. It's like a tattoo. Right. You leave an imprint on the wall, and then the pigments, because they're inorganic and minerals, they adhere into the molecules of the lime and sand. Right. So you use silica sand or marble dust, whatever you want to use, and caustic lime, and that mixes together, and then it starts to, as you put it on, the pigments on it starts to absorb. Like you pour water onto sand, and it soaks in. Yeah. So it starts to soak in, and it's really neat to watch when you paint, because it's like you're putting paint over sand, and it like It's
Yeah, like you can see it absorb. Yeah.
It's like drinking the pigments.
Yeah.
So, and you have to be cautious about what you paint, you know, because the pigments have to go in certain orders, like because of the density of the minerals that you're using. Because you use lapis lazuli, which was considered more valuable than gold at some point in life.
Wow.
You know, so it's the dark blue, aquamarine blue.
Yeah.
That comes from the lapis lazuli stone,
Yeah.
which I think it was in Afghanistan or somewhere in the Middle East that had like mines. So they would mine those, and those would be more expensive than gold back in the day, you know?
Yeah.
When Michelangelo was painting
Right.
the frescoes in the Sistine Chapel.
Yeah, he was a fresco artist. I forgot about that.
And those were passed on through the migration from the people coming to this part of the country, you know, like the Europeans. So they brought all those things, and Diego Rivera as well learned from the Europeans. But also the Native Americans were painting in lime caves. So there's,
Right.
you know, so there was a connection of frescoes back before all of that. So the originators were the Native American.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, so painting the horses, you know, all those paintings are there because they use the ground minerals, pigments, and the wet lime walls inside the caves
Right.
that kept them safe. So they would tell stories on the walls, and that's what I do. That's what I want to do with the therapy, is
Right.
be able to have that person tell their story on their fresco. And so when they do the therapy with me, it takes a 3-month process.
Oh, wow.
Which would be brief therapy, but it would be focused on, you know, either trauma, CBT therapy, or, you know, play, whatever they want. I'll have different therapists work with me, I think, to see what specialty they want to work on.
Right.
Maybe they want to do couples therapy or marriage and family therapy, or maybe they're on probation and we can do a community project, you know. So I just want to like kind of bust out with a new theory in psychology that is focused on the urban life and also the ancient world.
Yeah.
So it's like bringing the two together.
Yeah, combining them. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that. No, you described fresco as a noble art.
Yes.
And I think that's really cool. And especially, I think it's a very noble thing to work with your community and really build them up. And like you said, kind of release that attachment to the victim mentality and empower them to take control and take their power back. Yeah. Like, I think that's super important. And I've really felt that, and it's just, to me, it's super noble. It's a very pure intention, you know what I'm saying, to want to help people and to help heal. And I liken it to, like, even just this podcast. It's not about me. It's not about like being cool or being on tape or having like it. I mean, it is fun and it's creative and I love doing it, and I want to get better at it. But my pure soul intention is for this to help people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I've gone through my own certain level of healing, I would say. And for me to hold on to the things that helped me out, it would be like a waste of knowledge.
Right.
So it's like I just want to give it away, and I want to put it out there. And even if it just helps one person, like, it's probably worth it. But back to you, I just wanted to ask, like, how fulfilling has it been to be not even kind of a healer in your community and working with your people and stuff like that? Like, it's got to be a great feeling, you know?
Oh, thank you for calling me that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard to reflect on things because when you're in the grunt of it, like, you know, especially because I stepped away, like, okay, so let's go back. So I graduated with my bachelor's in 2004 from the University of New Mexico. I actually wanted to go into nursing because I thought maybe I should be like my mom and do nursing. So I was still on that, like, I need to be practical.
Yeah.
You know? So I took some classes and got into the program. It was a accelerated nursing program after you get your bachelor's, and I just couldn't take it. they didn't teach it right. Like they were like forcing me to learn everything out of a book, and I'm like hands-on. So
Right.
I was like, no. Okay, so scratch that. And then the reality of being a therapist, I was working at Job Corps. Another epiphany of to be a therapist was working at Job Corps and having like the times from 1 o'clock till 10 o'clock I was available for the youth there.
Mm-hmm.
So I was only 26. So some of the kids there were like 24. So
Yeah.
I was like very cautious about like what I wore to work, because the boys are like they're the same age, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to be really cautious and just keep myself at a certain frequency of like I guess my mental health. So I like had to learn how to balance myself out with the kids, because I mean I had to be in charge, and like they try to push you around, and you know I wasn't having it.
Mm-hmm.
So I made structure and discipline in my classroom, and they loved me. We did so many wonderful things with art. I got them into the state fair. I had ones winning awards at the state fair for their art, and I just opened them up to things, and I knew at that moment as well that I was on the right path. Like these kids are learning, they're thriving, they're growing, they're healing, they're not sad anymore, they're not fighting with each other, they're communicating. Like I just knew at that time that I had something to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the Job Corps kids, I still talk to them, and like they're like, Miss Felix, and you're the best art teacher. And I was like, no, you were the artist. Like I was just giving you a place to do it. You know, like I just had a natural ability to make a safe place for people, and I felt love when I did it. Like I made our little wear carts, and I found things for them to have, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't even know where I was going again. But
I think we were talking about just like how fulfilling
it is.
Yeah,
so
fulfilling
there
to
you
work
go.
with your community. Yeah.
So and then I, you know, and I went and graduated. I was working at Youth Development Incorporated in Albuquerque, which is another nonprofit.
Yeah.
Huge youth development, gang intervention prevention programs. I worked for Mentoring Children of Prisoners program. I went to Washington, D.C. a couple times, New Orleans. You know, just talking about how important it is for children to have a relationship with their parent, whether it was in whether their parents in jail or not. You know, they need that reassurance of like, this is my parent, you know, this is what they're doing. Like they need that connection. And I feel like a lot of people, even people in my family, have cut off their children, or they had like nieces and nephews that are living with them, and they like cut them off from their parent because their parents are on drugs, you know. And it's like, I know that they're doing bad things, but just let them know what's going on. Like there is evidence that proves that connection, regardless of how it is important for the child to feel safe and understand the world.
Right. Yeah, because like our parents are like our example, and they're like our
We're very connected.
Yeah, and you like you're especially with like your mom, like you're inside of her for 9 months, and you're like hearing her heartbeat, and you know, and then you're kind of ripped out in this cold world, and it does get cold, and that's it's all that kind of like that imprint we were talking about.
And when you create a family, like you have your wife is actually a part of you, like physically, like she has you in her. She had your children, so that DNA is in her body. Like she knows more than you think she knows.
Super connected on like a very deep like level that we don't really understand.
I mean, I haven't had baby making sex, so I don't know much about that. If it happens, it happens. That's all I say. You know what I mean?
Well, I've always told you, even though you don't have kids or anything like that, you know, you've worked with so many, you probably know and have better experience with them than most people do that
I have
kids,
an outside look in
Right.
And I can be more compassionate.
But there is a certain like
But
relationship that you build with these kids. It's like you get attached to them. Like I can already feel that myself personally, you know.
I have an issue with attachment and detachment. Like
Okay.
naturally, I can detach,
Yeah.
but it's harder for me to attach
Mm-hmm.
because of the trauma. I think some of it, but it's good for being a therapist,
Right.
because I can keep a cool head. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like if I'm too emotional, then I fall into this transference, you know,
Okay.
where it's like I feel like, oh, I need to be there for you, like I
Right.
need to be your mom, and it's like, no, I'm not your mom,
No. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. No. Thanks for like correcting me on that too, because that's like I think we've talked about this too. It's like compartmentalization. Is that
Yes,
what it is?
yeah.
Okay. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Okay, so emotions and memories and all that stuff. So your hippocampus has memories. That's where you keep your memories.
Right.
Okay. And those memories, and this is where trauma comes in, where those memories, they become strong, the bad memories.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're dealing with something in the present moment, and if you haven't fully processed the trauma correctly, or you didn't have somebody to support you through that trauma exposure, or after, like you hold those memories and they become present,
Mm-hmm.
emotionally, physically, spiritually. Like you live that moment. If you speak about the trauma, you're in it. You're basically living trauma constantly.
Right.
So you're in flight, or freeze mode. Your anxiety's up, your depression's up. You can't move, your motivation's not there.
Mm-hmm.
You feel fatigue, you feel sick, you feel tired. Nobody's there. You know, it's just it becomes like a heavy weight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I come in as a therapist, and I'm like, let's lift that. Let's get rid of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like a very tall task, but
And you do the work. I'm just there. I'm just creating a safe place. I help you see and be aware of what's happening.
you help people find it in the healing within themselves.
Right.
Right? Yeah, that's always like a tough concept for me too, because it's always like the way I more or less used to think about it was like, oh, I just go in and I tell them like, hey, you go and do this and
Right.
do what I say, and I'll show you how to heal yourself. And it's just like, well, it's different for everybody. Like it's not like what worked for me will work for you, but like if I can inspire you to somehow work it out in your brain yourself and come to the conclusions, maybe even just through asking harder questions than you're used to normally answering.
Challenging.
Yeah.
That's CBT.
Yeah,
So
challenging. What does CBT stand for?
cognitive behavioral therapy.
Oh, okay. So yeah, it's like more of a,
I'm going,
even in my own like experience with therapy, I felt like that was the most, what's the word I'm looking for? It was the most, it was the best way for me to work out my own issues. It
Right.
was for,
to challenge.
she would be like, I want to challenge you with it on this right
She
here.
was a CBT therapist.
Was she?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
Yeah.
she was using CBT theory.
Okay, yeah, and that's why I was always like, all right. And then she would ask me a hard question, and I would be like, all right, damn it, like, you know what I'm saying? And then you really got to kind of think about it, and then actually expressing it. And oftentimes, I actually left those sessions like not in a good place.
No.
But
see, that's a trauma too.
yeah, and I come to find out through the healing process that those were the days where most of the work got done, though. And you're not supposed to necessarily come out of therapy just like, yay, let's go get life. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it kind of takes you down in the dumps, and then you work through it. And then by the next time you come in, you're like, you know what? That was awesome. Whatever happened there, that was cool,
I love that when my
Yeah.
clients like come to realizations.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had, I could talk about my clients, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
But they just have realizations in session, and then I'm like, it just feels so good. It just feels good to know that and those are the blessings you get for being a therapist or a healer.
Right.
Is seeing that fruition with your client, but you don't always get that.
Yeah.
And you can't beat yourself up about why couldn't help this point? Why couldn't I help them? And it's like, you can't help everybody. Not
Right.
everybody's ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to meet them where they're at. If they don't want to go down that road, you don't take them there.
Right.
You go where they want to go. And if I have a kid, I had a kid for a whole year during the pandemic. We'll talk about that experience, because I actually want to write a short book about my experience during the pandemic.
Right.
Transitioning from working in a nursing home, which I was an activities director, life skills, whatever, I forget what it was. Life enrichment director, that was my name. So
okay.
LED, yeah. And it was I love Alzheimer's. Like, that's where I go when I need a break from being a like hardcore therapist. Like, just go and do art and music with Alzheimer's, and like decorate the facility and make cookies. And I mean, I love working with elderly. Plus, it was an inspiration as a young person going to college, working with Alzheimer's for that whole time. They worked with my schedule. They were so peaceful and kind, and they helped me through my depression. I learned 123 songs in like a week, because the lady I took her job, she was singing and playing guitar, but I didn't play guitar. I just sang.
Right.
So I sang all the old songs. So that was my job, was singing up to the elderly, and then like having wine in the afternoon and cigars and like just hanging out. Like, I would just like be like them, and they would just tell me so many stories. Like Bill Sloan, I'll say his name because he passed away, but he was a crooner for Frank Sinatra.
Oh, okay.
So he used to DJ, and his mom was a tap dance instructor, and he used to do the Moonlight Serenade. So he was like da 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 da, da. And then he told me this song, and it was such a cute song. It's I'll sing it for you. It's a little shorty. He said, "I'm glad you turned me down, a very wise thing to do. I wouldn't wish a guy like me on a sweet little girl like you. Now don't worry, I'm adjusting very well. Now don't worry, it's not your fault I fell. I'm glad you turned me down and left me feeling blue. 'Cause I wouldn't wish a girl on a guy when somebody found someone new." I forgot the rest of it, but it was really cute.
Yeah.
And he used to just be so happy. And when he passed, it was so freaking weird. Like, I was there. Like, I saw so many people die. Like, I was with them when they passed. Like, it was like watching their spirits slipped out. And very interesting.
That is interesting. I've actually, not to cut you off, but I actually have been very intrigued by being with people while they pass. I've been having this like pull to want to experience that for some reason. Yeah.
Go work in a nursing home.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No,
but
you're fine.
Yeah, that's crazy. But it's so cool. Old people are so cool.
Yeah,
they
like, taught me so much. Like,
it's because like their whole life experience comes out through their personalities, and it's like you can learn, and they're just so fun, you know. Yeah,
I love them, and I feel like they're my angels. Like, I really do. Like, I feel like I did so much work. And that was when with the guy who I was telling you earlier, the guy with the 3 weeks, and he got Alzheimer's. Like, his family was very happy with me. They wanted to keep me, like, wrap me up in a box and take him home. Like, that's how much they cared about what I did with their father.
Yeah.
And he was able to calm down, and he was able to assimilate, I guess, to the community, you know, and yeah, it was very interesting.
Yeah, well, touching back on the pandemic thing, we were kind of talking before the podcast that, like, just the isolation, all the children with, you know, I even heard this thing that, you know, the kids with masks on, like, as they're developing, they're not seeing, like, people's expressions, and that's part of the mental development that they're supposed to be getting. And that, you know, this 2-year period is going to have decades worth of impact, you know, and that's really wild to think about. Right.
That's, and you know, what's good is, like, I would practice that with the kids, you know, expressions. Like, I had a 2-year-old. I mean, people are like, how do you have 2-year-old trauma clients? I'm like, trust me, I do. But yeah, just playing peekaboo and
Mm-hmm.
enjoying like our faces and like looking in the camera, like because I had to do everything on the camera.
Right.
And I would get like dinged. Like I remember this CASA worker, she just really was so upset that I couldn't be in person, and I was like, I can't. There's nothing I can do about it.
Right.
Like literally cannot be in person.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and there was stuff that happened. Like one of the big things that's changed now, and I just saw one of our coworkers. She was, I don't know if I can say her name, but she was working on a training about Zoom and looking for what's it called, abuse in the home, because we can't see the house. We used to be able to walk in the house and check it out.
Right.
You can smell, see, even no senses on the computer.
Right.
And one of the things I experienced was having these kids actually have to run away from their tia, you know what I mean, like because of abuse.
Right.
You know, they took off, and it was just like, whoa, I didn't even know that was happening. You know what I mean? And it shocked me, because how do we know if they're being abused? And I didn't see the signs, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like I saw some stuff, but I was quickly like manipulated to not think that.
Right, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're taking away like a whole 80% of the experience, if not more, of really trying to diagnose the situation.
Right.
Yeah. That's so crazy.
It was hard for me. And then because I that one did affect me, because I was like, I didn't see it. Like, how could I not see this? You know? But none of us knew what to do. We were thrown into this, you know, I mean, literally, like, okay, so St. Patrick's Day, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was after, right? So before St. Patrick was Fat Tuesday,
Right.
Mardi Gras.
Mm-hmm.
So Mardi Gras, we had a party, okay, at the nursing home. For some reason, I don't remember what, I called the company that I work for, and I said, okay, I had called them in August, and I was waiting for a raise at the nursing home. I didn't get the raise. So, you know, I said, you know what, I need to go back to my career as a therapist. So I called them, and they gave me an interview, and then literally they're like, okay, we'll meet you Casa Grande or whatever. And then they had to call me and say, you know what, we'll have to do it online because pandemic hit, you know? So it's like, yeah. So then I got hired. They said they were going to call me in a week, and I got hired 2 hours after my interview.
Oh, wow.
So they were impressed with whatever I had to say, you know? And so I had to wait a month before I started, because I was a director, so they had to find somebody to take my position. And so I had to wear a mask at the nursing home for a month and do the whole temperature thing. And it was very hard, like on the families, because they're used to seeing their loved ones. And having dementia and having that routine of seeing your family,
think about that. Yeah.
like it really affected them.
Yeah.
And like I amped up my activities, my singing. Luckily they had somebody like me there, because I was able to continue all the activities that needed to happen by myself.
Right.
Like literally, like it was hard work. Like I worked a lot, like physically moving people.
Yeah. And I could see that. And I like, cause like I said, I observe you, and I'm very motivated to be as hands-on with people as you are. You're very, very easily jump into a situation and you're ready to go. You're ready to move. And like, I admire that about you, because it's like almost, I feel like I gotta get warmed up, you know, like, and then it's like, all right, now we're going and stuff. But you just, if you feel very fluid, like you feel like very easily, like you just jump in the stream and get ready to go, you know? So I like that a lot. And I'm starting to understand why you've had a lot of like intense experience that way. And I didn't even think about the dementia thing, you know what I'm saying? Like, especially for people who are like having that short-term memory loss, where it's like, wait, who are you?
Yeah.
Who are you? Who are you? It's like, it's almost, this may be completely wrong, but it almost feels like having somebody recurringly come through, and even though you don't remember them, but you're getting that memory jolt back.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of working your brain a little bit, but if they're gone, it's just like, well, they're gone and I forgot about them.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like they're not coming back, so it's like it's
And
gone
we set it up through the windows.
Yeah.
So they would come to the window of their family and talk to them in the window, and I would go out there with my phone so they could hear them on the phone,
Right.
so they could hear better, because some of the elderly, they lose hearing, and it's not even sometimes they actually lost hearing, but the dementia, the part of the brain that tells you you're listening, kind of shuts down.
Right.
So they might actually be able to hear, but their brain says they can't. Just want to tell this story. There's a World War II veteran. He was a sailor, not a Marine. What do you call them? They're Marines, right? The ones that are in the boats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you got like maybe Navy SEALs.
Navy SEAL. So he was a Navy guy. Sorry.
Yeah.
And I think it was before. It was Memorial Weekend. I think it was. Yeah. So that's coming up. So or we're podcasting, whatever. So.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
it'll be out soon.
Yeah. So I got the Navy. I kept calling them. I was like, you need to come talk to him. And this is before the pandemic, but just a really interesting story. I got him to come out of his room because I told him the Navy is waiting for you. You need to get dressed, sir. We need to put your clothes on. You need to put your belt on. Let's go. We don't have time.
Yeah.
And he literally did it. And nobody else could get him out of that room. I was the only one that, when he needed his shot, I was the only one that could talk him into going out of the room.
Yeah.
Because this man would stay in his room. Like, he just didn't leave. And probably for good reasons. There's pandemic.
Yeah. Well, you probably tapped into like some deep things into his brain where he was like, oh, like I remember this.
You have to think outside the box when you work with people. Like, one thing when I was a kid, I always, and I don't know if it was Miss Arnott. She's one of my art teachers, and she's on my Facebook, so maybe she'll see this podcast. But she was so inspirational as a kid. Like, she would always tell us to just be open, be thought, don't just settle for no. Don't settle for that closed door. Don't settle for anything. Just be open to seeing what else is out there. And that always kept my mind open, because you have to keep those channels of creativity open in your life, and you become narrow-minded. So you have to be childlike.
Yeah.
Always. That's what keeps you going, is being playful and having fun and not taking things seriously, because that's boring.
Yeah. Completely. Yeah.
I'm like, I like to have fun. I'm like,
yeah. No, yeah, I totally agree. Got to keep it fresh. How important for you is your own self-care? Because obviously you're like, you're dealing with the trauma of others, and I'm sure you're probably absorbing some of that and taking it home. I mean, you're trying not to, obviously, with that compartmentalization, but I'm sure it's like, it's got to be troublesome a little bit.
Oh yeah, that was, we were talking about compartmentalization. Yeah, so that is key. Like, I learned that when I was working at YDDC, so working with the Youth Diagnostic Detention Center. So I had 123 clients, and I was getting PTSD. I was having trauma responses, and so I would be like driving home, not only from that, but the weariness of that job created like weakness in me, I guess. And I had so many snowboarding, skateboarding accidents. Like there was this big bear ditch that came down right by the YDDC, and this big bear ditch, and in 2006 or 4, I'm not sure what year, I was skateboarding with time ship racing and the outlaw races. So like just a bunch of crazy skaters from Dogtown were there, like the old school, like Tony Alva's been there, like just a bunch of crazy skateboarders. And so I was going down, and Joe Liam, he runs time ship racing. He was in front of me, and of course, like, he hits a patch of rocks, and then I hit the rock, and I'm like, and then my knee goes boop, and it bent the opposite way. And like Rob Palmer, all those people are like, just stand up and you do it yourself. You have to stretch your leg out. So they're like, they saw me biff it hard, so I was just like, I'm like, my knee is bent, and they're all straighten your knee, and I'm like, fuck. So I had to like push it straight myself, and then they kind of walked me up, but they made me walk up by myself.
Yeah.
So it's just like doing everything on your own. Like you have to get yourself up. You can't depend on other people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There, I diverted again. But compartmentalizing. So the PTSD came from seeing that ditch. Also, I had my finger chopped in a table saw in college at UNM. And just, I was like shaking and like driving, and I'd be like, and I just couldn't stop. It was just annoying. So after 4 or 6 weeks, I decided I needed to go to a therapist and just figure it out. And I had EMDR therapy done on me for an entire year, and it actually worked. So I don't have those responses as much. Like once in a blue moon I'll get them, but it's not like like it used to be. So and then I learned how to compartmentalize from my supervisor at the D home, and she said, when you go down the road on the way home, drop people off. I was like, what do you mean? They're all like, yeah, if you see like a ditch or something and you could say something about that person or think something and put them over there.
That's a great technique. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you just like you could just be at a stoplight and there's a bus stop right there and be like, all right, you're out. Yep,
you're out of here. Yeah. And then by the time you get home, they're all gone. And then you change your clothes or change your watch or take a shower, whatever.
That's great. I need to write that down.
Yeah, no I'll give you notes. Yeah, you can look at your video.
Like that is a great one, actually. Yeah, dropping them off. So is that part of your self-care kind of stuff, or is that more of just like a technique you use on a day-to-day?
I used to use it a lot because like when you're learning, you're strengthening those connections in your brain. Right. So your brain has neurotransmitters, so there's transmitting messages, you know. So as you strengthen those abilities, it becomes second nature. So now I don't have to think about it; it just happens. Yeah. You know, so it's like my files are already. It's like almost like the Matrix. Everything's just.
That's like your new default, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like default. You want to get to that point where things are just default. Like you've brought the awareness to the emotion that causes the physical reaction, which causes the action. Yeah. You know, because everything is what you think and then what you.
Yeah, and that's kind of like right there. What you explained to me is like the definition of doing the work, right? Yeah. It's like you're doing something that at this moment is not your normal thing, but you're programming yourself to do that thing to the point where that's your new normal, I guess. Right. And then you put yourself on a new vantage point, and then from that point, you're going to be comfortable again at some point. And then you're going to have to find something new that takes you to that next level that continues that healing to keep progressing. So it's for me it's always been a lot of mental work. It's not I don't know if it's doing any specific thing, but it's always been for me like hearing a tool like you just gave where you're dropping people off, but being conscious of it enough during the day that you're practicing it. So it's like, all right, I'm recognizing that this is going on right now. I got to practice this. And even if you do it for 1 or 2 minutes, or it just has a little bit of effect, and then maybe at the end of the day you do it one more time, and then next week now you're starting to catch it. You're like, all right, I need to do it again and again, and then it just embeds and embeds.
Right. And that sounds like my exercise routine right now. So it's like I started with just like sitting on the dirt and meditating and being like, I walked all the way over here to meditate. You know, it's just like baby steps, but like I try to just do everything real natural. Like I don't try to like force myself. I don't really like to put on workout clothes and just be and now I'm starting to look at it because I'm like sweating more, but you know, it's like before I wasn't even sweating. Yeah. My lymphatic system was blocked. Like I had to go to like Salvador, you know, like the Mexican chiropractor to kind of like push out my lymphatic system. Right. And then acupuncture to get rid of the stress and like really just kind of slim out all the toxins out of my body. You know, it's like one of the biggest things I did recently in the last couple of years was quit smoking. So.
Great. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it was killing me, like, literally.
Yeah. You got to clear out the chakras a little bit.
There you go, chakras. I feel chakra movements all the time now because now I'm shifting from being, I was never unhealthy. I wouldn't say I was unhealthy because I had a good, clean bill of health like the beginning of this year. And I love when the doctor says, you don't need any medication. You're fine. You're healthy. I'm like, oh, fuck. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I was like, I'm just going to stay on that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because that was good news. Because my mom's like, you're 40 something. Not going to say exactly what age I am, but just say we're on the closer to 50 side. But yeah, just trying to get my mom to like, because she's a nurse and she's just, you know, she worries about my health and, you know, she wants me to live a long time and be there because we lost both of my brothers. You know, I'm the last child of my family, you know.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a loss of like they got sick and died, like they were murdered. So
Yeah. Sorry to hear that.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's got to be rough. I lost my uncle as a young child, and I know that really, it did a lot as far as like hurt and pain for my mom because he did it in our home.
Oh.
Yeah, he took his own life.
Yes.
And I remember being very small and sleeping in my mom's room
Mm-hmm.
and waking up and looking out of my mom's door into our living room where I saw like sirens, or not sirens, but the lights of the, you know, ambulance vehicle or whatever, and just hearing my mom like sobbing profusely, like in complete agony. And like, to me, I always think back at that as like I never actually witnessed it, and I don't know what happened, but I
Right.
was there around the trauma, and it had to have imprinted on
Well,
me.
it
maybe
did. What
a
did it
little
make you
bit.
feel? Do you remember that? What
Yeah.
did you feel when you?
Well, I just
she was
remember
doing it?
being scared because I saw the lights.
So you
and
felt
then
fear.
And then I
And
heard
what
my
did you
mom.
do? Where did you go with that fear? Did you sit there with it? Did you go to her?
No, I don't remember. It's
don't
just
remember.
it's literally just the memory is me opening my eyes, seeing the light,
Yeah.
hearing my mom, and then maybe just going back to sleep or being kind of restless and my mom coming into the room and sleeping with me at some point. But I don't really know much. I don't
What
really remember
happened?
much.
What was the next memory after that you remember?
I don't know. Even on a timeline,
Well, you went to the funeral.
no, I don't remember doing
You
that.
don't do that either?
I don't remember doing that.
So you disassociated.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. I remember being in that house around that age period and having memories still, but I couldn't tell you what timeline it was in.
But
like
when
if
did
it was
you
before
remember
or
the
after.
last thing that you remembered after he had passed that you do?
Doing after that?
Mm-hmm. Like even just anything from that age.
Yeah. I honestly, okay, whoa. So